Blood pooled beneath Myra's knees as she cradled the dying pup, her own split lip dripping crimson onto his matted fur, another gift from the wolves who called her filth, vermin, mistake. But his eyes, goddess help her, his eyes held the same desperate loneliness that haunted her reflection. The steel teeth of the bear trap had nearly severed his hind leg. Someone had set it deliberately, cruelly, in a place where only the smallest and weakest would wander. Mira knew that kind of evil. She wore its marks on every inch of her skin. "Shoo," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Nobody spoke to her anymore. Nobody had in years. "I've got you." The pup whimpered, his body convulsing. He couldn't have been more than 6 weeks old. Too young to shift, too young to understand why pain existed in a world that should have been warm dens and mother's milk. Myra's own wolf stirred weakly in the back of her mind, or what was left of it. Years of wolfsbane in her food, in her water, had shattered that part of her soul into fragments. She couldn't shift anymore. Couldn't heal. Couldn't feel the moon's pull or hear the pack song in her blood. She was broken, and everyone made sure she remembered it. The walk back to her shed took forever. Her ribs ached where Beta Marcus had kicked her that morning for not scrubbing the pack house floors fast enough. Her bare feet left bloody prints in the frost. November in Montana was unforgiving, and her threadbare dress did nothing against the cold. The shed leaned against the forest's edge like it was too tired to stand upright. Fitting. The roof leaked, the walls had gaps wide enough to see through, and the door hung crooked on rusted hinges. But it was hers. The only space in Blackthorn Pack territory where she could breathe without someone's hatred pressing down on her. She kicked the door shut and laid the pup on the dirt floor, her hands shaking. Think. She had to think. Her only blanket hung from a nail. Moth-eaten wool that smelled of mildew. She tore it into strips with her teeth, her fingers too weak and numb to manage it. The pup's breathing came in wet, rattling gasps. "Stay with me," Mira whispered. "Please. Stay with me." She wrapped the makeshift bandages around his mangled leg, pulling them tight enough to slow the bleeding but not so tight they'd cut off circulation entirely. He screamed, a sound too human, too knowing, and she nearly vomited from the guilt of causing him more pain. When the bandages were secured, she crawled to the corner where she kept her food. One strip of dried rabbit meat remained from her last hunt, 3 days ago. Her stomach cramped with hunger, eating itself from the inside out, but she took the meat between her teeth and chewed it slowly, methodically, mixing it with spit until it became a paste. The pup's muzzle was cold when she pried it open. She smeared the paste onto his tongue, praying to a goddess who had abandoned her long ago that it would be enough. His eyes cracked open, pale gold, too bright, too aware for an animal so young. He looked at her, really looked, and Mira felt something crack in her chest. Recognition. He knew what it meant to be unwanted. He knew what it meant to hurt so badly that death seemed like kindness. "I know," she whispered, pulling him against her chest. "I know." Night fell, and with it came the fever. The pup thrashed in her arms, his small body burning like a coal. His whimpers turned to howls, high and keening, and Mira rocked him the way no one had ever rocked her. Her mother had, once. Before the sickness took her. Before Myra's father looked at his 5-year-old daughter and decided she was the reason his mate was dead. The lullaby came without thought, words in the old language that she barely remembered. "Hush now, little warrior, the moon keeps watch tonight. Rest now, little warrior, till darkness turns to light. The forest holds its secrets, the stars will sing you home. Hush now, little warrior, you'll never be alone." Her voice cracked on the last line. Lies. Pretty lies people told children before the world showed its teeth. But the pup's seizures slowed. His breathing evened out. By the time she reached the second verse, he had gone still in her arms, his heartbeat steady and strong against her palm. Mira didn't sleep. She sat with her back against the wall, holding him, feeling the rise and fall of his small chest. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, the pack running, hunting, living the life she'd never have again. She was 22 years old, and she was so tired of surviving. The forest called to her sometimes, when the beatings were particularly savage or the hunger particularly sharp. She could walk into those trees and just keep walking until the cold or the wildlife or her own broken body finally gave out. It would be easy. Easier than this half-life of scrubbing floors and swallowing poison and pretending she was anything other than a mistake nobody wanted to fix. But then the pup sighed in his sleep, burrowing closer to her warmth, and something in Myra's chest loosened. Just a fraction. Just enough to take another breath. Dawn crept through the gaps in the walls, gray and cold. The pup was gone. Myra jerked awake, she didn't remember falling asleep, and scrambled to her knees, searching the shed's corners. Nothing. The bandages lay in a neat pile where he'd been sleeping, stained with blood but empty. Her heart hammered. Had someone taken him? Had he wandered off to die alone? Then she saw it. A single black feather lay in the center of the shed, longer than her forearm and darker than midnight. It gleamed with an oily iridescence that made her eyes water if she looked at it too long. And the smell, goddess, the smell. Ancient magic, the kind that predated packs and territories and everything the modern wolves thought they understood about the world. Power that made the air taste like copper and ozone. Warning. The word appeared in her mind unbidden, carved there by something that wasn't her own thoughts. She reached for the feather with trembling fingers, and the moment her skin made contact, pain lanced through her skull. Images flashed behind her eyes, too fast, too violent. A massive black wolf with silver eyes. Blood on snow. A crown made of bones. Screaming. So much screaming. She yanked her hand back, gasping. The feather lay innocuous on the dirt floor, but Myra's instincts, the ones that had kept her alive through 17 years of abuse, shrieked at her to run. To bury it. To forget she'd ever seen it. Instead, she picked it up carefully, wrapping it in the remains of her blanket. The pup was gone, but he'd left her a message. Whether it was a gift or a curse, she couldn't tell. But for the first time in years, Myra felt something other than numbness settle in her bones. Curiosity. Terrible, dangerous curiosity. And underneath it, so faint she almost didn't recognize it, hope. Chapter 2. The earthquake started at midnight. Myra was awake, she was always awake, when the first tremor hit. The shed groaned, dirt raining from the ceiling, and she pressed herself into the corner, making herself as small as possible. Outside, the pack house erupted in chaos. Wolves howled. Someone screamed. Then she felt it. Power, rolling across the territory like a tsunami, so thick and suffocating she couldn't breathe. Her broken wolf whimpered and went silent, instinct telling it to hide, to submit, to pray. Through the gaps in the walls, she saw them coming. Hundreds of wolves poured through Silver Paw territory like a dark flood. They moved with military precision, enormous beasts that made her pack mates look like children playing dress-up. Their eyes glowed in the darkness, gold, silver, amber, and their growls shook the ground beneath her. At their center was something that couldn't be real. A black wolf the size of a small car, his fur so dark he seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Silver eyes burned in that massive skull, ancient and merciless. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle, his shoulders, telling stories of battles that should have killed him a dozen times over. Alpha King Thorn Blackridge. The executioner. The beast who cannot die. Myra's bladder nearly gave out. She'd heard the stories. Every wolf in North America had heard the stories. Thorn Blackridge had ripped his own father's throat out to claim the throne at 19. He'd united the northern packs through blood and terror, leaving entire territories as graveyards for those who defied him. They said he couldn't be killed, that he'd walked away from silver bullets and wolfsbane arrows and challenges from alphas twice his age. They said he had no mercy. No conscience. No soul. And he was coming straight for her shed. Myra tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She watched through the cracked door as the giant wolf shifted mid-stride, bones reforming with sounds like gunshots. The man who emerged stood 7 feet tall, built like violence made flesh. Scars covered his chest, his arms, his throat. His black hair hung loose to his shoulders, and those silver eyes, goddess help her, those eyes found her hiding spot like a predator spotting prey. He moved with terrifying speed. The door exploded inward, with splintering, and suddenly he filled her entire world. Mira scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The walls stopped her. Trapped. This was death. Finally, mercifully, death. She closed her eyes and waited for it. You. His voice was gravel and smoke, rough like he didn't use it often. Mira forced herself to look at him, to meet those silver eyes, because if she was going to die, she'd do it on her feet, or at least on her knees, since standing wasn't an option anymore. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, while she watched in disbelief, this monster, this legend, dropped to his knees before her. The executioner. On his knees. In her rotting shed. You saved my son. The words took too long to make sense. Son. The pup. The pup with the 2 bright gold eyes and the mangled leg and the... Oh, goddess. When you had every reason to let him die. His massive hands clenched into fists against his thighs. When you were dying yourself. His voice broke on the last word, and Mira flinched. This had to be a trick. A game. Some new torture her pack had devised to finally break what little remained of her spirit. Name your price. She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed, her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. Heavy footsteps pounded toward the shed. Alpha Marcus burst through the doorway, his beta right behind him, both of them breathing hard. They froze when they saw Thorn kneeling in the dirt. Your Majesty, Marcus said, recovering quickly, his politician's smile sliding into place. I apologize for the confusion. This Omega is pack property. Damaged goods, I'm afraid. Worthless, really. If she's caused offense. Thorn moved. 1 second he was kneeling before Mira. The next, his hand was buried in the beta's throat, claws extended, blood spraying in arterial spurts. The beta's eyes went wide, then empty. Thorn dropped the body like garbage, his gaze never leaving Myra's face. You were saying, Marcus? The alpha stumbled backward, his face gray. Around the shed, hundreds of Thorn's wolves had gathered, forming a living wall of muscle and fangs. They watched Marcus with the patient interest of predators who knew their prey couldn't escape. Thorn returned to his knees before her, moving slowly, deliberately. Like she was the dangerous one. Like she mattered. I'll ask once more, little Omega. His voice gentled, and somehow that was more terrifying than his rage. What do you want? Myra's mind spun. What did she want? Freedom. Food. A single day without pain. Her mother back. Her wolf whole. Things impossible and foolish and... I want. The words scraped out of her damaged throat. I want to leave here. Something flashed across his face. Relief? Grief? Before she could identify it, he nodded once. Done. He stood, and the world seemed to shrink around his presence. Gather what's yours. She almost laughed. What was hers? The rags on her back? The dirt beneath her fingernails? But she reached for the blanket-wrapped feather, clutching it to her chest. Thorn's nostrils flared. He went absolutely still, his head cocking like a wolf hearing something beyond normal range. He breathed in deep, and Mira watched his pupils blow wide, silver swallowed by black. No, he whispered. Then louder, anguished, no. He staggered back a step, his hand pressed to his chest like he'd been shot. Around them, his wolves whined and paced, responding to their alpha's distress. Mira didn't understand. What had she done wrong? Thorn's gaze snapped to Marcus, and the rage that transformed his face made her previous fear seem quaint. This was apocalyptic fury, the kind that ended civilizations. How long? Each word dropped like a stone into still water. How long has she been like this? Marcus's throat worked. She's always been weak. How long? The roar shook the shed's frame. Marcus fell to his knees, his wolf forced into submission by sheer dominance. 17 years, he gasped. Since her mother died. Thorn's claws extended. The wolves around them began to shift, feeding off their king's rage, ready to tear Silverpaw apart on his command. Mira knew she should stay silent. Should let this happen. These wolves had tortured her for 17 years. They deserved whatever horror Thorn would unleash. But she'd spent the night holding a dying pup, singing him lullabies, and she was so tired of death. Please. Her voice barely carried, but Thorn heard it. He went rigid. Please, no more death. He turned to her slowly, and the naked anguish in his eyes stole her breath. They broke you. His voice cracked. They poisoned you. Starved you. Beat you. Each word seemed torn from somewhere deep and wounded. And you beg me for their lives? I beg you for peace, she whispered. For a long moment, Thorn didn't move. Then his claws retracted. The tension bled from his shoulders, though his eyes promised Marcus that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. He approached Mira again, and this time when he knelt, he extended his hand palm up. An offering, not a demand. Come with me, he said quietly. Let me take you somewhere safe. Somewhere warm. Let me, his voice broke again. Let me fix this. Mira stared at his hand. At the scars crossing his knuckles. At the steady strength in those fingers. She placed her small, trembling hand in his. His fingers closed around hers with infinite gentleness, and she felt him shudder. Mine, he breathed. My mate. Chapter 3. Blackridge Castle rose from the mountain like something out of a nightmare, all black stone and iron, sharp angles and shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Towers pierced the sky like accusing fingers. Gargoyles leered from every corner. Even the moonlight looked cold here, silver and distant. Mira stood in her assigned room and tried to breathe. It was beautiful. Objectively, stunningly beautiful. Silk sheets the color of cream covered a bed large enough for 5 people. Velvet curtains in deep burgundy pooled on marble floors. A fireplace bigger than her shed crackled with warmth. Everything gleamed, polished wood, crystal vases, gold fixtures. It felt like a tomb. She'd tried the bed that first night. Lasted maybe 10 minutes before panic clawed up her throat. Too soft. Too open. Too exposed. She'd rolled off and crawled to the closet, pressing herself into the back corner where the darkness felt safer. That had been 3 days ago. Food appeared on silver trays 3 times daily, rich stews, roasted meats, fresh bread with real butter, fruits she didn't have names for. Her stomach rejected all of it. She managed plain bread if she ate it slowly, tiny bites that her damaged system could tolerate. Everything else came back up, violent and painful. The servants whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. The king's charity case. The broken Omega. Place your bets on how long before he tires of the novelty. Mira sat in her closet now, arms wrapped around her knees, and waited for the real torture to begin. This kindness was the setup. She'd learned that lesson young, the worse the initial gentleness, the more creative the eventual cruelty. A soft sound made her tense. The bedroom door creaked open. Small footsteps crossed the floor, hesitant but determined. Then a child's face appeared in the closet doorway, blonde hair, gold eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. Prince Kieran. He looked about 6 in human form, though Mira had no idea how wolf aging worked for royalty. He wore silk pajamas and carried a stuffed wolf that had seen better days, its fur matted and one ear missing. He stared at her. She stared back. Then, without a word, he crawled into the closet and sat beside her, leaving a careful foot of space between them. He clutched his stuffed wolf to his chest and stared at the wall. They sat in silence. Mira didn't know how long they stayed like that. Time felt strange here, elastic and unreliable. But something in her chest loosened having him near. Two broken things seeking dark spaces. Two creatures who understood that sometimes survival meant making yourself small. "I sleep in my closet too," Kieran finally whispered. His voice was rusty, unpracticed. "The bed is too big." Mira nodded. Words felt unnecessary. "Thank you," he added, so quietly she almost missed it. "For the lullaby." Her throat tightened. She reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and gently squeezed his shoulder. He leaned into the touch like he was starving for it. Well. How fitting. They both flinched. A woman stood in the bedroom doorway, backlit by hallway light. She moved into the room with liquid grace, and Myra's breath caught. She was porcelain beautiful, the kind of beauty that seemed carved rather than born. White blonde hair cascaded down her back in perfect waves. Ice blue eyes assessed everything with surgical precision. Her gown probably cost more than Myra's entire pack's territory. Luna Vivian. Thorne's mate. Kieran's mother. The damaged caring for the damaged. Vivian's laugh was crystalline, sharp enough to draw blood. How precious. She glided closer, and Kieran pressed himself against Myra's side. The movement was instinctive, seeking protection, and Vivian's eyes flashed with something ugly before her smile widened. "Tell me, Omega." She crouched before the closet, her movements predatory despite their elegance. "Do you think you can heal what I broke in him?" The words hung in the air like poison. Vivian reached out and stroked Kieran's hair. He went rigid, every muscle locked tight, his breathing shallow. She noticed and laughed again, that terrible crystalline sound. "I'm his mother," she said, her gaze boring into Myra's. "And you're a temporary charity case keeping his bed warm until he forgets your smell." She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her gown. "Enjoy the closet, little Omega. It suits you." She left in a swirl of expensive perfume, and Kieran didn't unclench until her footsteps faded completely. The castle made Mira feel like an exhibit. Servants stared. Courtiers whispered behind jeweled hands. She caught fragments as she tried to navigate the endless corridors. Damaged goods, charity project, how long will she last? Poor thing doesn't know she's a placeholder. She was trapped in a beautiful cage, and everyone knew it but her. On the fourth day, she got lost trying to find her way back from the library, a space Kieran had shyly shown her, the only place in the castle that felt remotely safe. The corridors all looked the same, black stone and cold iron and shadows that moved wrong. A hand slammed into the wall beside her head. Mira yelped, pressing back against stone. Beta Soren loomed over her, tall, brutally handsome in the way predators often were, with amber eyes that saw too much. "I know what you are to him," he growled, his face inches from hers. "I can smell it on you both. That bond." Myra's heart hammered. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. Soren leaned closer, and his voice dropped to something like pity. "And if you think that bond will save you from her, you're already dead. Vivian doesn't lose what's hers." His expression hardened. "She destroys it." He pushed away from the wall and walked off, leaving Mira shaking. That night, there was a formal dinner. Mira had been ordered to attend, not invited, ordered, by some faceless servant who'd delivered a gown to her room. She'd put it on with trembling hands, the emerald silk hanging off her malnourished frame like a child playing dress-up. The dining hall was cavernous, filled with wolves who looked at her like she was the evening's entertainment. Thorne sat at the head of the table. He'd been gone the past 3 days, pack business, someone said, and Mira felt his absence like a missing limb. Stupid. Dangerous. But true. Vivian sat beside him, radiant in white and gold. Mira watched as Vivian touched him. Constantly. Possessively. Her hand on his arm, his shoulder, his thigh beneath the table. Marking him in front of everyone. And Thorn endured it. That was the only word for it. Endured. His jaw clenched so tight Mira could see the muscle jumping. His eyes went distant, dark, something drowning swimming in their silver depths. His hands fisted on the table, knuckles white. He never touched Vivian back. Never looked at her. Never spoke to her unless directly addressed. He looked like Mira felt during beatings, somewhere else, somewhere safer, waiting for it to end. Vivian leaned close and whispered something in his ear. Thorn's entire body went rigid, and for just a second, Mira saw raw terror flash across his face before he buried it. Something was very, very wrong. Across the table, Soren caught her eye. His expression said, "Now you see it." Mira looked at Thorn, this massive, scarred alpha king who commanded armies and killed without hesitation, and saw the same thing she saw in Kieran's gold eyes. A victim. Chapter 4. Kieran became Myra's shadow, or perhaps she became his. Either way, they were inseparable. He would only eat if she sat beside him, coaxing small bites with gentle patience. Only sleep if she stayed nearby, her presence the only thing that kept his nightmares at bay. He spoke to her in whispers, fragments of sentences that slowly became whole thoughts, became conversations, became trust. The servants called her the ghost tamer. The courtiers upgraded their bets from, "How long will she last?" to, "How much will it hurt when Vivian destroys her?" But Kieran laughed. Quietly at first, then with more confidence. And every time that sound echoed through the castle's cold corridors, Mira felt like she could breathe a little easier. The problem was Thorn. Being Kieran's constant companion meant being in Thorn's proximity constantly. Meals. Training sessions. Evening hours when the king spent time with his son. And every single time, the mate bond flared like someone was driving hot knives into her chest. Her broken wolf tried to emerge, tried to reach for him, tried to complete what nature demanded. But it couldn't. It was too damaged, too poisoned, too shattered. The failure left Mira gasping, clutching her ribs, tasting blood. Thorn was worse. She could see his wolf rising in his eyes, silver drowning in black. Could see the violence trembling just beneath his skin. His hands would shake. His jaw would lock. He'd excuse himself abruptly, and she'd hear things breaking in distant rooms, furniture, walls, sometimes bones. The castle learned to stay away when the king was in proximity to his mate. It was killing them both. The library became their refuge, hers and Kieran's. It was the quietest place in the castle, all dark wood and leather bindings and the musty smell of old paper. Kieran liked when she read to him, her voice low and steady, creating a world where princes didn't flinch from their mothers and omegas weren't beaten. She was reading a story about dragons when she felt him arrive. Thorn stood in the doorway, still as stone. Kieran had fallen asleep on her lap, his small face peaceful in a way it never was when he was awake. Myra's hand had stilled on the page, her heart hammering. Thorn just watched. The hunger in his eyes wasn't sexual, it was desperate, starving, like a dying man glimpsing water. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time felt wrong around him. Finally, Thorn moved deeper into the library, his footsteps silent despite his size. He stopped a careful distance away, close enough to hear but far enough not to trigger the bond's agony. He's laughing again. His voice was barely a whisper, raw and broken. "Because of you. I heard my son laugh today." Myra's throat tightened. Thorn's hand lifted, reaching toward her hair, then stopped. Shaking. His fingers curled into a fist so tight she heard his knuckles pop. "You're saving him," he said, and it sounded like a confession. Like a prayer. "And it's killing me." "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. His eyes closed. "Because you're mine. My mate, my salvation, my ruin, and I cannot have you. I am bound to another. I am marked by another. His eyes opened, and the anguish in them stole her breath. I am poisoned by another. He turned and left, moving too fast, like he was fleeing. Mira looked down and saw blood drops on the floor. Perfect crimson circles where he'd clenched his fists hard enough to drive his claws through his own palms. The bond rejection was getting worse. Mira couldn't eat, even bread made her violently ill now. Couldn't sleep without nightmares. Her body was wasting away, consuming itself, the unfulfilled mate bond slowly killing her already fragile system. She'd catch Thorne watching her from across rooms, horror in his eyes, like he was witnessing a murder he couldn't prevent. Because he was. And he was both victim and executioner. On the seventh night, restless and aching, Mira found herself wandering the castle's endless corridors. She got lost, again, and ended up in a wing she'd never seen before. Older. Darker. The air tasted of iron and despair. A door stood ajar, flickering lights spilling through the gap. Mira pushed it open. The room was a shrine to pain. Chains hung from the ceiling, their metal stained rust red. Whips lined the walls, leather, barbed, some with silver woven through. A table held implements she didn't have names for, all designed for one purpose, to hurt. The stone floor was stained dark in places, the pattern suggesting years of repeated use. And blood. Fresh blood. Leading to a private chamber beyond. Dear gods, she whispered. He uses them on himself. Mira spun. An old man stood in the doorway, grizzled, bent with age, carrying a healer's bag. His eyes held the weary knowledge of someone who'd seen too much suffering. Every night, the healer continued, moving past her to gather bloodied cloths from the side table. Punishing his wolf for wanting what he cannot have. I don't understand. The old man's expression softened with something like pity. He's been slowly dying for 8 years, girl. Since the day Vivian marked him. He sighed, long and heavy. Whatever keeps him bound to her is necromantic magic, death magic, blood magic, the kind that stains souls. And it's eating him alive. Eating them both alive, him and that boy. Myra's legs gave out. She caught herself against the torture table, her hand landing in something wet. Why doesn't he break it? You think he hasn't tried? The healer laughed bitterly. He's tried everything. Every witch, every shaman, every dark practitioner in the Northern Territories. The magic won't break. And every day it holds, it takes more from him. More control. More humanity. More life. The temperature in the room dropped. Mira felt her before she heard her, a presence like frost on glass, beautiful and deadly. He's magnificent in his suffering, isn't he? Vivian materialized from the shadows, because of course she did. She wore white silk that made her look like an avenging angel. Her smile was serene, peaceful, the expression of someone completely at peace with their monstrosity. The healer grabbed his bag and fled. I do this. Vivian moved closer, circling Mira like a wolf circling wounded prey. I own his pain. Every scream, every wound, every drop of blood he sheds trying to escape me. She laughed, that crystalline sound. He's tried to kill me 17 times. Each attempt more creative than the last. And each time, the magic punishes him instead. Mira couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Vivian stopped in front of her, so close Mira could smell her perfume, something floral and rotting underneath, like flowers on a grave. And now, little Omega. Her fingers trailed up Myra's throat, gentle as a lover, cold as a corpse. I'll own yours too. Her touch burned. Mira gasped, stumbling back, clutching her throat where Vivian's fingers had been. The skin felt wrong, too hot, too tight, like something was burrowing underneath. Vivian smiled. The mate bond is such a delicious torture, isn't it? Knowing he's yours, you're his, but you can never have each other. Never touch. Never complete. Her eyes glittered with malice. I wonder how long you'll last. The last Omega who caught his attention made it 3 weeks before she walked into the forest and never came back. She glided toward the door, then paused. Sleep well, little ghost. Dream of all the things you can never have. Mira collapsed when she left, retching onto the stone floor. Her throat still burned where Vivian had touched her. And in the distance, she heard Thorn screaming. Chapter 5. The blood came at dawn. Mira woke in her closet, where else, and tasted copper. She touched her face and her fingers came away red. Not from her nose or mouth. From her eyes. She stared at the crimson on her fingertips, and some distant part of her understood this was the end. Her broken wolf howled weakly in the back of her mind, a dying thing trying one last time to reach for its mate before the silence took it forever. The castle physician confirmed what her body already knew. Fatal mate bond rejection, he said flatly, his weathered face grave. Your wolf is trying to complete a bond that cannot be completed. The strain is destroying you from the inside out. He closed his bag with a snap. You have weeks. Maybe days. Mira nodded. She'd expected this. Had known from the moment she touched Thorn's hand that loving him would kill her. At least it would be quick. The physician left. Mira sat on the bed. She'd graduated from the closet in the past few days, though she still slept there most nights, and waited for the fear to come. It didn't. Just exhaustion. Just relief that soon, finally, the hurting would stop. Then she heard it. A roar that shook the castle's foundations. Primal. Anguished. Rage and grief woven so tightly together they became one sound. Thorn. The breaking started in the throne room. Mira heard the destruction from 3 floors away, stone cracking, metal shrieking, wood splintering. Servants fled past her doorway, their faces white with terror. Someone shouted about the king losing control, about Alpha Command dropping warriors to their knees, about the beast finally going mad. She should stay here. Stay safe. Stay away from the monster everyone whispered about. Instead, Mira ran toward the sound. The throne room was carnage. The massive stone throne lay in pieces, shattered like it was made of glass instead of granite. Deep claw marks gouged the walls. Tapestries hung in shreds. Warriors knelt on the floor, unable to rise, held down by the sheer dominance rolling off their king in suffocating waves. Thorn stood in the center of the destruction, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his hands. His eyes were full black, his wolf so close to the surface that his human form seemed more like a suggestion than reality. Vivian stood near the doorway, pristine in silver silk, watching her husband destroy himself with serene interest. Thorn, beloved. She reached for him. Do not. The command hit like a physical blow. Even Mira felt it, her knees nearly buckling. The warriors on the floor whimpered. Thorn turned on Vivian, and the look on his face was apocalyptic. I have bled for you. Killed for you. Given you everything. His voice dropped to something more terrifying than shouting, quiet, absolute finality. But I will not let her die. I will not. Vivian's perfect mask cracked. Just for a moment, something ugly and ancient showed through, something that had nothing to do with the beautiful woman she pretended to be. You don't have a choice, beloved. She said the endearment like a curse. The bond one forged cannot be broken except by death, yours or mine. And I have ensured that killing me kills you. Her smile was poisonous sweetness. We are bound by blood magic, dark oaths, and your father's dying curse. Did you think usurping a throne came without cost? Thorn went very still. What? Oh, did I never explain? Vivian laughed, delighted by his horror. Your father placed a death curse on you the moment you tore out his throat. You would be bound to a mate chosen by dark magic, never able to claim your true mate, slowly poisoned by the false bond until you went mad. She pressed a hand to her chest in mock modesty. I was the witch who promised to help you break it. Instead, I became it. I enslaved the great Alpha King, and he never even knew. The room went silent except for Thorn's ragged breathing. 8 years, he whispered. 8 years of feeding off my power. My pack. My son. Not your son, Vivian corrected pleasantly. Elena's son. Your precious first love, the one I murdered while you were away at war. But you were so grief-stricken when you returned, so vulnerable. Easy to manipulate into believing the child was ours, that we'd made it in your grief, that you'd simply forgotten through trauma. She examined her nails. Magic is such a useful tool. Myra's head spun. Kieran wasn't Vivian's son. The abuse, the torture, the calculated breaking of a child, it had all been designed to destroy Thorn through the thing he loved most. There is no way out, beloved. Vivian's voice softened into false sympathy. One of us must die. And you physically cannot harm me without your own heart stopping. The curse made sure of that. She moved closer, and Thorn flinched like she'd struck him. So we'll stay together, you and I, until the madness takes you completely. And your little Omega will die slowly, painfully, knowing she's the reason you finally broke. She turned to leave, her work done, her victory complete. Mira. Kieran stood in the doorway, small and shaking. He moved past Vivian without looking at her and went straight to Mira, wrapping his arms around her waist. She hired them, he whispered against her stomach. The rogues who hurt me. She paid them to make it last, to make it hurt, so father would find me broken. His small voice cracked. I heard her talking to them. She wanted me to die slowly. She wanted it to destroy him. Myra's arms came around him automatically, protective fury burning through her exhaustion. Vivian paused at the door. The boy lies. Trauma does such terrible things to young minds. Then she was gone, leaving poison in her wake. Thorn collapsed to his knees among the rubble of his throne, and the sound that came from him was nothing human. Nothing wolf. Just anguish, raw and endless. Mira held Kieran and watched the strongest man she'd ever known break into pieces. Soren found her that night in her room. She'd gotten Kieran to sleep, finally, and was sitting on the floor of her closet, watching blood drip slowly from her eyes into a cloth. It didn't hurt anymore. Nothing did. She was too far gone for pain. The beta let himself in without knocking, his amber eyes grim. He held something wrapped in black silk. There is one way. He knelt before her, his massive frame folding with unexpected grace. The curse says he cannot kill her. You're not bound by his father's magic. He unwrapped the silk, revealing a knife. The blade was obsidian, carved with symbols that hurt to look at. Black poison coated its edge, viscous and wrong, smelling of death and dark magic. This poison will kill her, Soren said quietly. Nothing can stop it. Not her magic, not her wards, not her immortality spells. One cut and she dies within hours. Hope flared in Myra's chest. Then died just as quickly when she saw his expression. But the magic will demand a life for a life. His jaw clenched. The death curse doesn't care who breaks it, only that blood is paid. You'd trade yourself for him, Omega. You'd die in her place. Mira stared at the knife. She thought of Thorn's eyes, silver drowning in darkness, starving and desperate. Thought of Kieran's small body shaking with nightmares, his whispered confessions of torture. Thought of 8 years of enslavement, of a good man twisted into a monster by a witch's curse. Thought of the closet she slept in, the beatings she'd survived, the 17 years of hell that had taught her one undeniable truth: some lives mattered more than others. And hers had never mattered at all. Until Thorn looked at her like she hung the moon. Until Kieran laughed in her arms. Until she finally understood what it meant to be needed. Mira reached out and took the knife. How long do I have? She asked calmly. Soren's expression cracked. Hours after she dies. Maybe less. Long enough to say goodbye? Maybe. Mira nodded and tucked the blade into her dress. Then it's enough. Mira. He saved me, she said simply. He found me dying in a shed and gave me warmth, food, safety. He gave me a purpose. She smiled, and it felt genuine. I was dead already, Soren. At least this way, my death means something. The beta stared at her for a long moment, then slowly bent his head in respect. The kind wolves only gave their alphas. The king will never forgive himself. I know. Mira stood, the knife heavy against her hip. But he'll live. And Kieran will have a father who isn't slowly going mad. She met Soren's eyes. That's enough. She walked past him, out of her beautiful cage, toward the monster who needed killing. And for the first time since her mother died, Mira felt like a hero instead of a victim. Chapter 6. The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky, painting the castle crimson. Vivian's grand ball glittered with obscene opulence, crystal chandeliers, golden champagne, courtiers draped in jewels and silk. Music floated through the air, elegant and hollow. Everyone who mattered in the Northern Territories had come to witness the Luna's triumph. And at the center of it all, displayed like a prize, stood Thorn. Vivian kept him close, her hand possessive on his arm, her smile radiant. She wore white, always white, like she was something pure instead of something rotting. The mate mark on Thorn's neck gleamed in the candlelight, and Mira could see the revulsion in his eyes every time Vivian touched it. Mira watched from the shadows near the wall, too weak to stand without support. A servant had positioned a chair for her, the dying Omega, kept alive just long enough to witness her own defeat. Blood still seeped from her eyes, slow and steady, staining the collar of her borrowed gown. She clutched the spot where the obsidian knife pressed against her ribs, hidden beneath fabric. Just a little longer. Just until Vivian drank from her ceremonial chalice, the one Mira had laced with poison that afternoon, her hands steady despite their trembling, her resolve absolute. Such a pity, Vivian's voice carried across the ballroom. She raised her chalice to the assembled crowd. Our sweet charity case couldn't join the festivities properly. The mate bond rejection is quite advanced, I'm afraid. Days now. Perhaps hours. The courtiers murmured sympathetically, but their eyes gleamed with gossip hunger. Vivian smiled at Mira across the distance. But we celebrate life tonight, not death. To the blood moon, and the magic it brings. She drank deeply from the golden chalice. Mira counted her heartbeats. 1. 2. 3. Vivian's expression flickered. Confusion, then realization. Her eyes snapped to Mira, and understanding blazed there, rage and shock and something almost like respect. You. The word became a shriek. Vivian's body convulsed, the chalice falling from her fingers. Dark magic exploded outward from her like a shockwave, black and purple and writhing with malevolence. Courtiers screamed, diving away. The music stopped. Chaos erupted. And the curse activated. Mira felt it latch onto her, hooks of dark magic sinking into her chest, her throat, her soul. Chains materialized, spectral and burning, connecting her to Vivian's collapsing form. Life for a life. Soul for soul. The curse demanded its price, and she'd volunteered to pay it. Pain exploded through every nerve. Mira tried to scream but couldn't draw breath. The chains pulled, dragging her down, draining her life force like water through a sieve. She fell. Massive arms caught her before she hit the marble floor. Thorn. His face swam above hers, beautiful and devastated. His mouth moved, her name, she thought, though she couldn't hear over the roaring in her ears. Blood poured from her mouth, her nose, her eyes, hot and thick and endless. Across the ballroom, Vivian lay on the floor, her perfect face twisted in agony and triumph. She dies for you, she gasped, laughing even as black poison ate through her veins. And you can't even save her. Poetic. Then she died, her laughter cutting off mid-breath, her eyes going flat and empty. The chains pulled harder. Mira felt her heart stuttering, failing. Felt her lungs refusing to draw breath. felt her soul beginning to fray at the edges, unraveling like old cloth. Thorn's hands cupped her face, desperate and shaking. She felt power slam into her. His alpha force, trying to share his life, trying to forge a mate bond through sheer will. But the magic was corrupted, wrong, twisted by the curse. It burned instead of healed, adding to her agony instead of easing it. No, 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 his voice broke. Mira, please, please. Small hands touched them both. Kieran pressed his palms to his father's arm and Myra's shoulder, his young face calm despite his tears. She sang to me, he said clearly. When I was dying, she sang Mama's song. The moon song. He began to sing, his voice high and pure. Hush now, little warrior, the moon keeps watch tonight. Rest now, little warrior, till darkness turns to light. The forest holds its secrets, the stars will sing you home. Hush now, little warrior, you'll never be alone. The words resonated with power, ancient, forgotten, sacred. Not a lullaby. An invocation. Magic flooded through Kieran into Mira, silver and white and blinding. Moon magic, pure and old as the first howl, the first hunt, the first transformation. It poured into her dying body like liquid starlight, finding her broken wolf, her shattered soul, her fading heartbeat. And instead of healing what was broken, it burned it away. Mira felt her Omega wolf, poisoned, tortured, destroyed beyond repair, die. The chains shattered. Power erupted from her in a shockwave that sent everyone stumbling backward. Thorn barely maintained his hold, his eyes wide with shock and awe. Light consumed her. Blinding, beautiful, terrible light. Her body convulsed, changing, transforming, becoming something else. Something new. Something impossible. When the light faded, Mira stood on 4 legs. Her fur was pure silver, gleaming like moonlight made solid. Her eyes glowed white gold, radiant and ancient. She was larger than any Omega, graceful as water, powerful as thunder. Magic radiated from her invisible waves, making the air shimmer. The legends had a name for what she'd become. Luna Prime. A creature of myth, blessed by the moon itself, born once in 1,000 years from sacrifice and transformation. Not Omega, not Beta, not Alpha, something beyond the hierarchy, something sacred. The ballroom fell silent. Myra's glowing eyes swept across the assembled wolves, and every single one, Alpha, Beta, Omega, dropped to their knees in instinctive reverence. Then she shifted back to human form, magic swirling around her like silk. She stood naked among the rubble and blood, her body healed, her scars gone, her frame no longer skeletal but strong and whole. Her hair had gone silver white, cascading down her back. Her eyes still glowed faintly, otherworldly and beautiful. She looked at the kneeling crowd with confusion. Looked at Kieran with curiosity. Looked at Thorn with polite blankness. Who are you? Her voice was different, melodic, layered with power. Where am I? Thorn's face went white. Mira? Is that my name? She tilted her head, genuinely asking. I don't remember. Understanding crashed into him like a physical blow. He'd saved her life. The moon had transformed her, reborn her, made her into something magnificent. But the cost was everything she'd been before. The Omega who'd shown him mercy. Who'd loved his son. Who'd sacrificed herself without hesitation. Who'd looked at him with those soft, damaged eyes and seen past the monster to the man beneath. Gone. A stranger stood before him wearing her face, wielding unimaginable power, with no memory of the love that had destroyed and remade them both. Kieran reached for her hand, his face wet with tears. You sang to me, he whispered. You saved me. She looked down at him kindly but distantly. Did I? She smiled, and it was beautiful and empty. I'm sorry. I don't remember. Thorn made a sound like a wounded animal. The Luna Prime, who had been Mira, who had been his salvation, who had been everything, looked at him with stranger's eyes and asked, "Why are you crying?" The blood moon hung overhead, witnessing the cruelest mercy the goddess had ever granted. Life, but not life. Salvation, but at the cost of everything that mattered. Thorn fell to his knees before his reborn mate, and for the first time in 8 years, he wept. Chapter 7. They called her the Silver Luna. Mira heard the whisper everywhere she went, servants in hallways, warriors in training yards, courtiers who wouldn't meet her glowing eyes. They feared her. Revered her. Treated her like something holy and untouchable. She hated it. She'd learned the basic facts of her existence in the week since the blood moon. Her name was Mira. She was mated to Alpha King Thorn Blackridge, though the bond mark on her neck felt foreign, like jewelry she didn't remember putting on. She'd sacrificed herself to break a curse, and the moon had remade her into something powerful. But the knowledge sat in her mind like words in a book, true but not real, facts without feeling. She was powerful but empty. A vessel filled with magic and nothing else. Thorn wouldn't touch her. She'd catch him watching her with such naked longing it made her chest ache for reasons she didn't understand. But he kept his distance, his hands to himself, his presence carefully respectful. He wouldn't force her, wouldn't claim her, wouldn't take what she couldn't willingly give. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like loss. Kieran refused to give up. Every night, the small boy would appear in her doorway. She'd been given the Queen's chambers, vast and lonely, and ask quietly if he could stay. And every night, she said yes, because something about his gold eyes made her feel less alone. He'd crawl into the massive bed beside her, careful not to touch, and whisper stories. "You gave me your food when you were starving," he said the first night. "Your last piece of rabbit. You chewed it into paste so I could eat it." Mira listened, trying to feel something. Anything. "You stayed awake for 3 days so I wouldn't be alone," he continued another night. "You sang Mama's song even though your voice was broken from screaming." The word screaming made her flinch, though she didn't know why. "You called me brave little wolf," Kieran whispered, his voice thick with tears. "Even when I couldn't speak. Even when I thought I was broken forever. You said I was brave." His small hand found hers in the darkness, and Mira squeezed it gently. "I don't remember," she said softly. "But I'm glad I did those things. They sound right." "They were," Kieran said. "You were the rightest thing that ever happened to us." Fragments came slowly, agonizingly. Not memories, something deeper. Instincts. Feelings without context. She found herself sleeping in the closet some nights, curled on the floor, and couldn't explain why it felt safer than the bed. She flinched when people raised their voices, her body reacting before her mind caught up. She gravitated toward small, dark spaces and couldn't eat rich food without her stomach rebelling. And Thorn. Goddess, Thorn. Her body relaxed when he entered a room, some deep part of her recognizing safety, home, mate. She'd catch herself leaning toward him before stopping, confused by the impulse. Her wolf, powerful, glowing, strange, would purr when he was near, a sound she couldn't control or understand. "Why do I feel this way?" she asked him once, frustrated and lost. "I don't know you, but my body does. It's like I'm a stranger in my own skin." Thorn's expression cracked. "Because you loved me once. And his voice broke. I failed to protect you from this." "From what?" "From everything." He wouldn't explain further. The attack came on the 13th day. Mira was in the garden, one of the few places that felt peaceful, when the howls started. Warriors poured into the courtyard, weapons drawn, surrounding a group of unfamiliar wolves. At their head was a man who made her skin crawl for reasons she couldn't name. Alpha Marcus of Silverpaw. She'd been told about him, her former alpha, one of those who'd abused her. But the information was clinical, distant. She looked at him and felt nothing. Until he smiled. "There's my little Omega." Marcus's voice was oil-slick charm. Heard you'd gotten an upgrade. Come to reclaim what's mine. Myra's wolf snarled, sudden and vicious. Her body tensed, every muscle coiling. Wrong. He was wrong, dangerous, bad. She's not yours, Thorn said, appearing at Myra's side. His voice was death quiet. She never was. Oh, but she was. Marcus pulled a collar from his belt, rusted iron, stained dark. Wore this for 17 years. Property of Silverpaw Pack, marked and owned. He moved forward, reaching for her. Myra's body remembered what her mind didn't. The flinch. The terror. The helplessness of having something clamped around your throat, choking, claiming, reducing you to nothing. Power erupted from her like a bomb. Pure moonlight, silver and blinding, slammed into Marcus and sent him flying backward. He hit the ground hard, his wolves scattering. Mira advanced on him, magic crackling around her like lightning, her eyes blazing white gold. Don't touch me. Her voice echoed with ancient power, and Marcus screamed, his body burning where her light touched him. She was going to kill him. She could feel it rising in her, righteous and terrible. She didn't remember what he'd done, but her body did. Her wolf did. And they wanted blood. Thorn's hand closed gently around her wrist. Let me, he said quietly. Myra's power banked, still humming beneath her skin. She looked at Thorn and saw controlled fury, the kind that came from years of restraint finally breaking. He crouched beside Marcus, who was writhing and smoking. She doesn't remember you, Thorn said conversationally. But I do. I remember every scar. Every burn. Every day you starved her, beat her, broke her. His claws extended. She was mercy, and you made her suffering. Now you'll learn the difference. What followed was neither quick nor kind. Mira watched, and with each wound Thorn inflicted, something inside her cracked open. Images flashed behind her eyes, a rotting shed, blood on dirt floors, pain that never ended, a voice saying worthless, filth, mistake over and over until she believed it. Marcus's screams became her screams. The garden became a shed. Thorn became everyone who'd ever hurt her. Mira collapsed, clutching her head, and the memories slammed into her like a tidal wave. Every beating. Every poisoning. Every moment of degradation and despair. 17 years of trauma downloading all at once, vivid and visceral and unending. She screamed, her body convulsing, lost in a psychological hell that wouldn't stop. Arms caught her. Held her. Anchored her. I've got you. Thorn's voice, steady and sure. Come back to me. I'm here. But she couldn't. The memories were drowning her, pulling her under, and she was dying again, bleeding again, breaking again. Breathe with me. Breathe. His hand on her chest, rising and falling, creating a rhythm for her to follow. His voice in her ear, constant and unwavering. His presence wrapping around her like armor against the assault of her own past. Time became meaningless. Later, she'd learn it was 3 days. 3 days of screaming, thrashing, reliving every nightmare in brutal detail. 3 days where Thorn didn't sleep, didn't eat, didn't leave her side. He held her through seizures and flashbacks, whispered anchoring words, breathed with her when she forgot how. Kieran brought her water, pressed it to her lips when she could swallow. Soren stood guard at the door, turning away everyone who tried to interrupt. And slowly, agonizingly, the storm passed. Mira surfaced like someone breaking through ice, gasping, disoriented, raw. She was in her bed, tangled in sheets soaked with sweat. Thorn sat beside her, his face haggard, his silver eyes bloodshot but alert. Welcome back, he said hoarsely. Mira stared at him. Really looked. And remembered everything. The pup in the trap. The lullaby. The feather. His face when he'd knelt before her in that rotting shed. The mate Bond's agony. Vivian's poison. The choice to die so he could live. And this man who'd held her through hell without flinching, who'd given her space to remember, who'd loved her enough to let her go and patient enough to wait for her return. The first words she spoke were, "You were worth dying for." Thorn made a sound between a laugh and a sob. His hand came up, hovering near her face, asking permission. Mira leaned into his palm, and when their skin connected, the mate bond flared, not with agony, but with rightness. With home. "And you," Thorn whispered, his voice breaking, "were worth living for." Chapter 8. 6 months could heal many things, but not everything. Mira stood before the mirror in the Queen's chambers, studying the woman reflected there. Silver white hair cascaded down her back, longer now, threaded with tiny braids Kieran liked to weave during quiet evenings. Her eyes still glowed faintly, moon-blessed and otherworldly. The scars were gone from her body, erased by her transformation. But she could still feel them. Every lash mark, every burn, every place she'd been broken. They lived beneath her skin like phantom limbs, invisible but present, reminders of who she'd been and how far she'd come. The Luna Queen. That's what they called her now. She'd earned it the hard way. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and Mira melted into Thorn's embrace without thought. The mate bond hummed between them, complete and consuming, a living thing that tied their souls together. 6 months of learning each other, claiming each other, building something from the ashes of trauma and sacrifice. They were obsessed with each other in the way only survivors could be, possessive, intense, worshipful. He was her anchor. She was his salvation. And together, they were unbreakable. Nervous? Thorn murmured against her hair. Terrified, Mira admitted. Today was her official coronation. The realm would recognize her as Luna Queen, equal to Thorn in power and authority. But it wasn't the ceremony that frightened her. It was everything else. The supernatural world had noticed a Luna Prime walking among them. Old covens wanted to bind her power for their own use. Rival packs saw her as a threat to be eliminated. Ancient enemies emerged from shadows that had hidden them for centuries. And the Ashwood pack, Vivian's family, wanted her dead. "They're coming," Mira said quietly. "Today. I can feel it." Thorn's arms tightened. "Let them come. We're ready." They weren't ready. The Ashwood forces hit Blackridge territory like a plague, hundreds of wolves backed by dark magic that made the air taste of rot and death. At their head rode Vivian's brother, a necromancer named Aldrich whose power rivaled Myra's own. The battle was apocalyptic. Myra's silver light clashed against his death magic, moon against decay, life against destruction. The sky split with their power, reality itself straining under the weight of their conflict. Around them, Thorn's warriors fought Ashwood's army in a brutal, bloody melee. "You killed my sister!" Aldrich screamed, his hands wreathed in black flame. "Stole her mate. Corrupted her son. She enslaved him." Mira shot back, her power building. "Tortured a child. She was a monster. She was mine to protect." Death magic slammed into Myra's shields, cracking them. "And you took her from me." The fight raged for hours. Mira was stronger, but Aldrich was cunning, ruthless, willing to sacrifice his own warriors to gain advantage. He was losing, and he knew it. So he changed tactics. Kieran's scream cut through the battlefield like a knife. Myra's head snapped around. Aldrich had the boy, had somehow gotten past the guards, past the wards, past everything. He held Kieran by the throat, black magic coiling around the child's small body like serpents. "Surrender," Aldrich snarled, "or I finish what Vivian started." "Slow. Painful. While you watch." Kieran's eyes met Myra's. Terrified but trying to be brave. Her brave little wolf. Time slowed. Mira felt her power rising, responding to her rage and fear. But she knew, goddess, she knew, that using her full strength would consume her. Luna Prime magic was infinite, but the vessel was not. She'd burn from the inside out, a supernova of moonlight that would save Kieran but destroy her in the process. Mira, no. Thorne's voice, sharp with panic. He'd reached the same conclusion she had. Don't you dare. Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself again. She looked at him. Her mate, her love, her reason for living. The man who'd taught her she mattered, that she was worth saving, that her life had value beyond what she could give others. Mira smiled and cupped his scarred face. You taught me I was worth saving. Now let me show you I'm worth fighting for. Her hands fell away. Trust me. Mira. She turned back to Aldrich and unleashed everything. Silver light exploded from her in a wave that consumed the battlefield. Not death, but transformation. Her power didn't destroy, it purified, healed, remade. It tore through Aldrich's death magic like tissue paper, wrapped around Kieran protectively, and slammed into the necromancer with the force of divine judgment. Aldrich screamed. His magic shattered, his army fell, his power broke against hers like waves against a cliff. And Mira stood at the center of it all, burning like a star, her body incandescent with moonlight. But she didn't let it consume her. She'd learned. Finally, painfully learned. She wasn't a victim who survived by dying for others. She was a warrior who survived by living for herself, for her family, for the future she'd fought so hard to claim. The light faded. Mira stumbled, exhausted but alive. Thorne caught her before she could fall, and Kieran crashed into them both, sobbing and whole. I told you, Mira gasped against Thorne's chest. Trust me. His laugh was half sob. Never again. Never again do you scare me like that. No promises. The coronation happened that evening, despite the battle, despite the exhaustion, because Mira refused to let fear dictate their lives anymore. She stood before the assembled packs in a gown of silver and midnight blue, a crown of moonstone resting on her white hair. The wounds from the battle had been healed, but she could still feel them, another set of scars to add to her collection. Thorne knelt before her, and the entire realm held its breath. My queen, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. My mate. My salvation. Silver eyes met glowing gold. You took a monster and taught him to be a man. Mira pulled him up, fierce and gentle at once, and kissed him in front of everyone. You took a ghost, she whispered against his lips, and taught her to be alive. The packs erupted in howls, acceptance, celebration, recognition. Luna Queen Myra's first act was to establish sanctuary law. Any Omega, any abused wolf, any rejected pack member could claim asylum in Black Ridge territory. No questions asked. No judgment rendered. The darkest pack in the realm would become a haven for the broken. Because Mira knew what it meant to be broken. And she knew what it took to become whole. 3 weeks later, the castle physician requested an audience. Mira sat in the throne room beside Thorne, Kieran playing with wooden wolves at their feet, when the old healer entered with an expression somewhere between awe and concern. Congratulations, your majesties, he said carefully. The Luna Queen is pregnant. Myra's hand flew to her stomach. Thorne's eyes went wide. Twins, the physician continued. One carries the alpha bloodline, strong, dominant, traditional. The other. He hesitated. The other carries Luna Prime magic. Pure moon essence. Silence fell like snow. The old prophecies speak of such twins, the healer said quietly. Children who will unite or destroy the supernatural world, depending on how they're raised. His gaze was grave. Your children will be the most powerful wolves alive. Or the most dangerous. Pray you raise them with the mercy you showed a dying pup in the dark. Mira looked at Thorne. At Kieran, who'd stopped playing to listen with his 2 knowing eyes. At her hands, scarred beneath the surface, strong despite everything, capable of both destruction and creation. Mercy, she said softly. Then louder, fiercer, and the will to fucking fight for it. She stood, moving to the balcony that overlooked Blackridge territory. The pack had gathered below, sensing something momentous. Kieran joined her, taking her hand. Thorn stood at her other side, solid and sure. Together, they threw back their heads and howled. The sound echoed across the mountains, a song of survival and strength, of trauma overcome and futures claimed. The pack answered, hundreds of voices joining theirs, until the night itself seemed to sing. Mira, once a broken Omega who slept in a rotting shed, stood as Luna Queen and felt the moon's blessing wash over her like welcome rain. She'd been mercy when the world showed her only cruelty. Now she would be justice for all those who came after. The prophecy could worry about itself. She had a family to raise and a realm to protect. And goddess help anyone who tried to stop her. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.